Greetings, my friends. I am your brother and your friend, Reverend Pastor Jean Wallenstein Melfort. I am so glad you decided to spend the next 15 minutes here. Theologians have been pondering about the Bible for centuries. We've been hearing of great theological doctrines, and still, most of us remain confused. How could we read scriptures differently to promote concrete, abundant lives? My friend, the moment has come to read scriptures from the perspective of liberation and transformation. Let's hear the Holy Scriptures today, creating a space for liberation and transformation right here and right now. Romans chapter 12 verse 1. I appeal to you therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Spirit of the living God, breathe on us. Amen. The letter to the Romans is divided into two major sections. From chapters 1 to 11, the writer exposed the reader to deep theological doctrines like creation, rebellion, sin, redemption, justification, salvation, sanctification, and many more. And from chapters 12 to 15, he exposed them to concrete ethical or practical recommendations for the transformation of the community. Trying to understand the first 11 chapters of theological doctrines can be inspirational, but also very challenging. I was glad when he got to the practical sections, to tell you the truth, because too much theory and no practice have the potential to confuse the reader. Too much theology and no ethics has the potential to cause arguments that go nowhere. But here, after expounding on many deep theological doctrines, the writer recommends specific and concrete actions to take for real transformation. In the first verse of chapter 12, we find three recommendations to engage ourselves in true act of worship. We are recommended to exhort each other within a framework of equality by the mercies of God. We are recommended to offer our bodies as a living sacrifice to God. And we are recommended to leave behind all tradition that hinder our liberation and transformation. First of all, the writer addresses readers as his brothers and sisters. He says, I appeal to you therefore, brothers and sisters. The adverb therefore here refers to some theological concept that he previously stated. He is not writing here as an authoritarian episcopal leader, as he's done with the churches he founded in Thessalonica, in Corinth, and in Galatia. Instead, he's encouraging his fellow brothers and sisters as an equal. How much better our relationships could be if we saw each other as equals? I simply wonder, how much kinder could we be toward each other if we took the time out to listen to each other as opposed to imposing our views on each other? I wonder how much we would grow together if we agreed to work through our differences as brothers and sisters and not as superiors and subordinates by the mercies of God. Now, the writer comes to beseech the readers not on his own authority. He writes to them by the mercies, the compassions of God. God's mercies that endure forever. God's mercies that embrace everyone no matter who we are. If God created everything and everyone, it simply means that everything and everyone belong to God. In our own religious tradition, we worship in a certain way, and that's okay. In other religious tradition, people may worship in a totally different way. But ultimately, everyone and everything on earth seek to worship, to be in relationship with the great creator of them all. It is by the mercies of this great creator that the writer appeals to the readers here. Now, long ago, in what the Christian tradition considers to be the Old Testament, we read about the story of a people who worshipped a God who fed on the smell of burnt meat. People had to bring animals to offer to God as a sacrifice. That is the way those people understood God. I simply wonder about the smell of that environment. It must have been like a slaughterhouse. But to them, it was how they appeased the anger of God. That was how they asked God to forgive their sins. They had to find the animal for the sacrifice no matter what. I wonder what happened when people could not afford an animal for the sacrifice. What happened? Did they stay lost in their sins, with their sins on their heads and on their family's head? I simply wonder. Now, there's good news here, my friends. No longer do we need to bring animals. No longer do we need to deal with a slaughterhouse environment. No longer do we need to worry about if we can afford an animal for the sacrifice or not. We simply offer ourselves as an act of worship. My God, that's good news. When we look at our bodies, they stand as marvelous masterpieces of the Creator. Our bodies are the best vehicles that carry our minds and in our soul. In other words, our bodies contain the best work of the Creator. The writer recommends us to offer to the Creator the masterpiece of the Creator's work. Oh my God. Down with offering dead animals as sacrifices, and up with offering our living masterpiece in worship. My gosh. Based on the three recommendations we find in this verse, to engage in true act of worship, we need to offer our best selves to God by serving each other. How do we take these recommendations within the perspective of liberation and transformation for worship, my friends? In the Haitian culture, we say, if you love me, you'll also love my child. If you're my friend, you must also be the friend of even the dog in my house. We can't love God if we don't love others, my friends. We can't love others if we don't love ourselves. We can't love ourselves if we don't take our self-care seriously. To present our bodies as a living sacrifice, our bodies must be taken care of. Therefore, we have a solemn responsibility to take our self-care seriously. We also have a responsibility to help others to care for themselves too. In other words, when we love God, we serve each other. To acknowledge the masterpiece of God, we recognize the worth in each other. To worship God, we maintain good relationships with each other. As a result, we become capable to spiritually serve God through concretely serving each other. Young men and women who offer their best selves to serve God are engaged in true act of worship. Families that offer their best selves to serve each other are engaged in true act of worship. Churches that give their best selves to serve their community are engaged in true act of worship. When we serve each other with our best selves, we become partners in creation with God. Wouldn't you like to be engaged in true act of worship too? Now, there were some monks in Thailand who wanted to hide a precious 10 feet pure gold statue away from an invading army. But it was too big and too heavy. They could not hide it anywhere. So, they covered it with white clay. When the army invaded, the soldiers only saw a clay statue that had no value to them. They passed it on and went to destroy the temple. 300 years later, as some other monks tried to transport the clay statue to a new temple, it fell poof and it cracked. That was how they discovered the pure gold statue covered under the clay. You know, my friends, it's a reality. We still live and work among different people with different agendas. We can't be naive to think that everyone is engaged in true worship. There are instances when we need to be protective of our best selves. There are times when we need to stand firm and stand strong boundaries. The Almighty gave us the liberty to speak out against tyranny. We must protect ourselves and all of those who are most vulnerable. We stand against all authoritarian structures that want to dominate and oppress us. Freedom is our birthright. No one was given a license in heaven or on earth to impose themselves on anyone. Absolutely not. Together, we offer our best selves to our divine Creator by serving each other. Together, we offer our best selves to create a community of transformed people. During the COVID pandemic, We learned things that we would have never learned out of any seminary. We learned lessons that years of ministry experience did not teach. We found out that the church building was never a prerequisite for worship. God is always with us wherever we are. We go to church buildings to socialize and fellowship with each other around our common faith and beliefs. For too long, most of us confuse the sanctuary for the presence of God. True worshipers do not worship only inside of traditional church buildings, but wherever they are. True worshipers do not worship only on one specific traditional day, but every day. True worshipers do not necessarily have to dress a certain way to worship, but they come just as they are, just as I am. True worshipers worship in spirit and in truth. Listen to a liberation and transformation span on the following words of scriptures here, my friends. He says, "Believe me, the hour is coming when we will worship the Creator, neither in our church buildings nor in Jerusalem. But the hour is coming and is now here when the true worshipers will worship in spirit and in truth. For the divine seeks such as these to worship Him. God is spirit, and those who worship God must worship in spirit and in truth." My friends, God's presence is with you wherever you are. God never forsakes you nor abandons you. As we are engaged in intentional acts of worship, let's encourage each other within a framework of equality by the mercies of God. Let's leave behind all old tradition that no longer support our growth and the growth of others. Let's work on our best selves to offer the best that we are to God by serving each other. And that, my friends, is a reasonable, logical, and spiritual worship. May it be so for all of us. May we all be liberated and transformed. May God be with you.